I think I didn't do anything wrong, just covered one little lie. I said I was working late, but the hotel receipt in my purse said otherwise. He didn't yell when he found it, he just looked at me like I was already gone. And now I can't stop wondering when he started collecting proof instead of arguments. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Aralyn Dore, and I swear I didn't do anything wrong. At least, not in the way everyone says I did. I just wanted to feel alive again, to have someone look at me like I wasn't invisible. That's not a crime, is it? I told Eli I was working late that night, but the truth was I met someone for dinner. Just dinner. At least that's how it started. The hotel receipt that slipped into my purse wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was one of those tiny accidents that only look bad when someone else finds it. And he did. Eli didn't shout, didn't accuse. He just looked at the paper, folded it once, and said, "Thank you for being transparent." Transparent, like I'd just handed him proof for some report. Since then, it's been quiet. Too quiet. His calm feels like a trap I can't see yet, like he's building something beneath the silence. My friends say he's overreacting, that I should stand my ground. My mother says men can't handle a woman's independence. But sometimes, when I wake up and hear the faint hum of the printer in the next room, I wonder if I already lost the story. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. Everyone lies sometimes. It's part of keeping peace, part of not having to explain feelings that no one wants to hear. I didn't lie to hurt anyone. I lied to protect the mood. That's what I told myself that night when I said I'd be working late. It started with something small, like it always does. A late project at the marketing office. A team dinner that went on too long. A new consultant, Tristan Vale, who somehow knew exactly how to make me feel noticed. He'd joined our firm to fix a failing campaign, the one I'd been trying to save for months, while Eli came home each night exhausted and silent. Tristan wasn't special, not really, but he had that ease about him, smiling at everyone like he already knew they'd like him. He was the type who always smelled like travel, like fresh air and motion. When he said I had presence, it hit something I hadn't felt in a long time. Eli never said things like that anymore. He used to, years ago, before the mortgage and the schedules and the school forms. Now he'd come home, hang his jacket neatly, and say things like, "We're low on milk." It wasn't cruel, it was just empty. I'd tried to tell him about my day, and he'd nod with that faraway look, like he was somewhere else. Maybe that's why I stopped telling him the full stories. That Friday, my boss asked if I could attend a dinner with the consultant team. It was supposed to be professional, but I knew Tristan would be there. I said yes too quickly. I remember glancing at my phone to text Eli that I'd be home late. Running over time at work, don't wait up, it wasn't even a lie yet, just a placeholder. The restaurant was warm and dim, with quiet music that made everything feel closer. We talked about the campaign, then about cities we'd lived in, then about nothing at all. Tristan said I worked harder than anyone in the department. I told him that was because I had more to prove. He smiled and said I didn't need to prove anything. I already looked like someone who'd made it. That line should have felt cheesy, but it didn't. It felt like oxygen. When the bill came, he slipped his card in before I could reach for mine. I said he didn't have to. He said he wanted to. And then somehow, we were walking through the hotel lobby next door, still talking, laughing about some industry joke that didn't matter. I told myself I'd just stop by for one drink at the bar. I didn't even sit close to him, not at first. But the way he looked at me, it was that attention, that light that makes you forget the rest of the world. I didn't stay long, an hour, maybe less. When I left, he stood to say goodbye, and his hand brushed my arm. It wasn't even a full touch, just a soft moment that made everything in me go quiet. I didn't kiss him. I didn't cross any obvious line. but I also didn't pull away fast enough. That was the part that stuck with me on the drive home. When I walked in, Eli was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. The clock said 11:42. He looked up once, then back down. I said the dinner had run late. He said he figured. His voice was calm, too calm. I poured myself water, feeling the room stretch between us. I asked how his day had been. He said fine, then added, "You should check your purse. I think something fell out." The hotel receipt was folded neatly on the table. I didn't even remember putting it in there. My heart stopped for half a second, then I laughed. I said it wasn't what it looked like. He didn't ask what it looked like. He just said, "I know." That calmness made me defensive. I said it was a work dinner, that the restaurant was part of the hotel, that I'd been with colleagues. He nodded like he believed me, but the way he kept his eyes on the receipt made me feel small. I said, "You don't trust me." He said, "I didn't say that." He folded the paper once more and slid it toward me. "Thanks for being transparent," he said quietly. Then he stood up, rinsed his mug, and set it on the far corner of the counter. Not beside mine, never beside mine anymore. That night, I lay awake listening to him move around the house. The faint click of a drawer, the low hum of the printer. I told myself he was just doing work, but it didn't sound like work. It sounded like order, like someone lining things up carefully. The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. His coffee mug was upside down in the dish rack, spotless. My own mug was still half full, the ring of cold coffee drying at the edges. A yellow sticky note was on the fridge. "Back later. Don't forget Jude's pickup." That was it. No heart, no "love you," just functional. At work, I told Mara about the receipt. She laughed and said all men snoop eventually. "They can't handle mystery," she said. "Don't act guilty, just play it cool." She even winked. I tried to do what she said, but something in me stayed uneasy. Around lunch, Tristan texted me. "Did everything go okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Yeah, he's fine." Tristan wrote back, "You sure you're okay?" I typed, "Of course," then deleted the thread. That evening, Eli was already home when I arrived. The house smelled like paper and toner. He was sitting at the kitchen table again, laptop open, eyes steady. I asked if everything was all right. He said, "You were working late again." I froze, unsure if he meant the lie or just the words. I said, "Yeah, you know how deadlines get." He nodded and went back to typing. The sound of the keyboard felt like nails in wood. I wanted to shout at him, to make him say something, anything, but the calm was worse than anger. Finally, I asked what he was working on. He said, "Sorting things." I said, "For work?" He said, "For life." I laughed too loud and said he sounded like a therapist. He didn't laugh. He just saved whatever file he was on and closed the screen. When he stood, his chair barely made a sound against the floor. That kind of silence, controlled, deliberate, made my skin crawl. Later, when I went upstairs, the guest room door was closed. A faint light glowed underneath. I heard a soft click, like a drawer locking. When I turned the knob, it didn't move. Locked. I called his name. No answer. In the morning, there was a new entry on the kitchen calendar. Downtown 10:40 a.m. I asked what it meant. He said, "Just a personal errand." I said, "You never write down errands." He said, "I do now." I spent that whole day convincing myself it was fine. People grow apart. People need space. Maybe he was seeing a counselor or signing up for a class. Something normal. That night, he came home calm as ever, took off his shoes, and said he'd picked up dinner on the way. I smiled, relieved. Maybe it was all fine after all. We ate in silence. The TV murmured in the background. Halfway through, he asked, "You deleted messages last night?" My fork froze. I said, "What?" He didn't repeat it. He just sipped his water and said, "You're good at clearing things. Always have been." I wanted to ask how he knew, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled and said, "It's called boundaries." He nodded. "Yes," he said softly. "It is." That night, I dreamed of paper, folded, labeled, stacked in neat piles. When I woke up, the printer light was blinking again. A single sheet lay on the tray, blank except for a faint smudge where something had been erased. When he left for work that morning, he didn't kiss my cheek. He didn't even touch my shoulder, just grabbed his keys, checked something on his phone, and walked out. I looked at the mug he'd left on the counter, clean, dry, turned upside down, and suddenly felt like it was me sitting there, emptied and flipped over. I told myself it was fine, that marriages go through quiet spells, that he'd come around when he saw I was still the same person. But part of me knew something was shifting underneath that calm. When I think back, I can almost pinpoint the exact moment the story slipped out of my hands. It wasn't the hotel receipt or the late nights. It was the laughter. My laughter, too loud, too sharp, the kind that makes everyone else feel comfortable except the one person who shouldn't have to laugh along. It was 2 weeks after the dinner. Things between Eli and me had become a quiet routine of politeness. He still cooked breakfast for Jude, still took out the trash, still asked if I needed gas in my car. Nothing had changed on the surface, and yet everything underneath had turned to glass. I could feel the tension every time his hand brushed the counter near mine. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just moved with this careful stillness that made me want to scream. When Mara suggested a night out with the team, I said yes without thinking. "You need to blow off steam," she said. "He's acting cold. Let him." She made it sound like therapy, and I wanted to believe her. We went to a rooftop bar downtown, one of those trendy places with fake plants and mood lighting. The city looked soft and golden from up there, like the world didn't care about consequences. Tristan was there too, already leaning against the railing with a drink in hand. He smiled when he saw me, and something in me eased for the first time in weeks. I told myself it was innocent. We were co-workers. We were celebrating. I let him stand too close, let him joke about my mystery husband, and didn't stop the laughter that followed. Mara egged it on, saying, "If he's jealous, that's his problem." Someone asked if Eli ever got mad when I worked late, and I said, "He's too busy checking spreadsheets to notice." It got a laugh. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. The drinks kept coming. Someone played a song I loved, and Tristan held out his hand, teasing me to dance. It wasn't romantic. It was light, fun, safe. Or that's what I told myself when I saw a camera flash from across the terrace. A few co-workers filmed it, laughing, posting clips of us twirling under the lights. One of them captioned it, "Work wife energy." By the time I got home, the video had a few hundred views in our office group chat. I didn't think Eli would ever see it. He didn't use social media much. He wasn't the type. When I opened the front door, he was sitting at the table again, the glow from his laptop reflecting in his eyes. I asked if he'd eaten. He said yes. I said, "We were just celebrating the new project." He said, "I'm sure you were." His tone was even, unreadable. I asked if he wanted to talk about whatever was bothering him. He said, "Not tonight." He closed the laptop slowly, and the click of the lid sounded final. I told him he couldn't just shut down like that. That silence was manipulation. He said, "You're the one who rewrites the story." I snapped back that he was paranoid. He said, "You keep saying that. Maybe it helps you believe it." The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and printer toner. I didn't even realize I'd left the machine on overnight. A blank page sat in the tray, half crumpled. When I picked it up, I noticed faint marks, like something had been printed and then erased. I tossed it away. At work, people were still talking about the video. Mara showed me a thread of comments. Some said we looked too good together. Others joked about chemistry. I pretended to laugh, though my stomach twisted. Then came the message. From an unknown number. Just one line. "Tell your husband not to take everything personally." I didn't know if it was a joke or a warning. When I showed Mara, she said it was probably Tristan being clever. I wanted to believe that. That evening, Eli didn't come home at his usual time. His phone went straight to voicemail. I checked the clock every few minutes, pacing between the living room and kitchen. When he finally walked in, he looked tired but calm. I asked where he'd been. He said, "Downtown." I asked, "Doing what?" He said, "Personal things." He sat down and began typing again, this time with papers beside the laptop. The headings were ordinary: utilities, household, bank, but his precision unnerved me. I joked that he was turning into an accountant. He said, "Someone has to keep track." I leaned over his shoulder to peek, but he closed the folder instantly. "Private," he said. I laughed. "Since when do we have secrets?" he said, "since honesty became dangerous." That shut me up. By the weekend, our friends were noticing. Mara came over for coffee and asked why Eli hadn't been at the last company dinner. I said he was being dramatic, that he didn't like being around people who actually had fun. She said, "He sounds exhausting." I agreed too quickly. Later, she posted a group photo from the rooftop night. I was laughing in the middle, hand on Tristan's shoulder. Eli's name got tagged accidentally in a comment thread. Someone wrote, "Man's lucky." Another replied, "Or cursed." When I saw that, my throat went dry. I untagged myself, deleted a few comments, but the damage was done. That night, Eli was already in the guest room when I got home. I knocked once. No answer. I said, "We need to talk." He said through the door, "We will, when there's something left to discuss." I told him I was tired of his cold act. He said nothing. I said, "You're making people think you're the victim." He said quietly, "I don't have to make them think anything." The next morning, the air felt heavy. The printer whirred again while I made breakfast. I turned to find another blank sheet on the tray. Beneath it, a single USB drive with today's date written in pen. I touched it, but the way it was placed, so deliberate, made me step back. When I went to pour coffee, I noticed the mugs again. His on the far counter, mine near the sink, always separate, always symmetrical. By afternoon, Mara texted me, "Your husband's got fans. Someone sent the video to his brother. It's going around Facebook now." My heart sank. I checked the post. There it was, our little rooftop dance, now captioned, "When the wife has more fun at work than at home." I left the office early. When I pulled into the driveway, Eli was sitting in the car with the engine off, just staring ahead. I knocked on the window. He rolled it down slowly. I asked if he'd seen it. He said, "Everyone's seen it." His voice wasn't angry, just tired. I started explaining, saying it was harmless, that people overreact online. He nodded, eyes fixed on something far beyond me. "It's always harmless," he said, "until it isn't." I told him he was being cryptic and dramatic. He said, "You call everything drama when you don't like the truth." That line stuck in my head the rest of the night. The next day, I decided to take control of the narrative. I told my coworkers the clip was just a joke, that Eli was insecure. At lunch, Mara and a few others started mocking him, calling him the jealous engineer. I didn't stop them. I even laughed when someone said, "Bet he's making a spreadsheet about your nightlife." It felt good to laugh again, to feel powerful. But when I got home, there was a faint smell of ink and toner again. On the counter sat an envelope addressed to him. Unopened. I lifted it. It was light, thin, official-looking. I set it back down, pretending not to notice. That evening, Jude came into the kitchen while I was reheating dinner. He asked, "Why does Daddy sleep in the other room?" I froze. I said, "He's just working late sometimes." He frowned and said, "He said he's sorting things." My stomach dropped. When Eli walked in, he greeted Jude softly, kissed his hair, then looked at me with that same distant calm. I wanted to ask what sorting meant. Instead, I smiled and said, "You're late again." He said, "So are you." After Jude went to bed, I poured wine and sat across from him. I said we needed to stop this Cold War. He said, "You can stop any time." I asked what that meant. He said, "You started it." I rolled my eyes. "You're impossible." He didn't argue. He just finished his drink and went upstairs. When I finally checked my phone, there was a new message from Tristan. "You okay? Heard things are weird at home." I typed, "It's fine, just overblown." He replied with a winking emoji. I deleted the thread again, though my hands were shaking this time. Before bed, I walked past the guest room. I heard soft typing again. I wanted to knock but didn't. Through the gap beneath the door, a faint glow pulsed, steady, patient, like a heartbeat I didn't understand. The strange thing about shame is how easily it hides behind applause. The more people laughed with me, the safer I felt, like public approval could erase private guilt. For a while, it worked. 2 weeks after the rooftop bar, our company threw a product launch party. Everyone was there, clients, executives, even Tristan's new supervisor from the parent branch. I told Eli about the event that morning. He didn't ask if Tristan would be there, but I could tell by the way he adjusted his tie in the mirror that he already knew. He said, "Don't stay too late." I said, "It's work." He said, "It always is." That night, the ballroom lights shimmered like a stage. I wore a silver dress that caught every reflection. Tristan greeted me near the stage, all charm and easy confidence. He handed me a glass of champagne and said, "You're glowing tonight." I told him to behave, but I smiled anyway. We were supposed to do a short presentation together, a light segment about campaign results. I took the mic, cracked a few jokes, the crowd laughed, and I felt that rush again, being the center of attention, being seen. Afterward, Tristan leaned in close and said, "You carried us. You always do." His hand brushed my back. Cameras flashed. The applause was still ringing when I saw Eli. He stood near the exit, hands in his pockets, watching. He didn't look angry, just focused, like he was memorizing everything. After the event, a few co-workers suggested a celebratory drink at the lounge next door. I hesitated, but Tristan said, "Come on, one drink. You earned it." I agreed, telling myself it would be rude not to. The lounge was smaller, quieter. People took photos, tagged me, and one of them, of Tristan's hand resting near my waist, ended up online before I even left the room. I didn't notice until later. When I came home, the house was dark. Eli was sitting on the couch, the faint light from his laptop flickering across his face. I said, "You could have joined us." He said, "I already did." I didn't understand until he turned the screen toward me. The photo was there, open on his browser. The caption read, "Dynamic duo killing it again." I tried to explain. He didn't interrupt, didn't accuse. He just looked at the screen, then at me, and said, "You seem happy when I'm not there." I said, "You're twisting everything." He said, "No, you're just performing it differently." I snapped that he was being paranoid again, that this obsession with optics was unhealthy. He said, "You keep calling it obsession so you don't have to call it evidence." Then he closed the laptop and went upstairs. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, sorting papers into labeled folders. Household, bank, utilities. I laughed and said he was turning into an accountant. He didn't respond. On his phone screen, a notification blinked. File uploaded successfully. When I asked what he was working on, he said, "Archiving." At work, people were still sharing the photo from the party. Someone joked that Tristan and I looked like a power couple. I played along, telling them my husband would have to step up his game. Everyone laughed, and that sound, the easy laughter, felt addictive. Later, Mara pulled me aside and said, "Your husband saw that post, right?" I said, "Probably." She grinned and said, "Then let him stew. Men like him need to be humbled." I didn't correct her. That evening, Eli didn't come home for dinner. Jude asked where he was, and I said he had a meeting. Around 9, I heard the garage door open. I was waiting in the kitchen when he walked in, holding a grocery bag. He said, "You forgot detergent." I said, "I didn't go shopping today." He said, "I know." I followed him to the counter. "Are you keeping score now?" I asked. He said, "Just recording what happens. That way I don't have to argue." His voice was so calm it made me want to throw something. Instead, I said, "You're acting insane." He said, "You'd prefer me loud. It's easier to paint me as cruel when I shout." That hit harder than I expected. I told him I couldn't live in this cold silence, that he was punishing me over nothing. He said, "If it's nothing, you wouldn't be defending it so hard." I slept in Jude's room that night. The next morning, the guest bed was made perfectly, the pillow untouched. On the kitchen counter sat a USB labeled May 17th. I picked it up, turned it over, then set it back down. When I checked my phone, I saw a new folder had appeared in our shared cloud drive. Archive A. At work, Tristan noticed I was quiet. He asked if everything was okay. I said yes, but my voice sounded thin even to me. He said, "You know, you deserve better than someone who makes you feel small." I said, "He's just stressed." He said, "You keep excusing him because it's easier than leaving." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. That evening, I met Mara and a few others for dinner. She brought up the photo again, joking about how Tristan and I looked too good together. Someone asked if Eli had said anything about it. I laughed and said, "He knows he can't compete." The table roared. I basked in it for a second, that fleeting warmth of being envied. Then a phone camera lifted from across the room. I didn't realize until later that someone had recorded me mid-joke, the laughter and the line about Eli not being able to compete. By the time I got home, the clip was already in our group chat. Someone captioned it, "Queen Energy." I wanted to delete it, but it was too late. Eli was in the living room typing again. I asked if he'd eaten. He said, "I had time." I said, "Why do you sound like that?" He said, "Like what?" I said, "Like you're writing my eulogy." He looked up then, meeting my eyes for the first time all day. "You already wrote it," he said. He went back to his screen. The faint whir of the printer started again, slow and steady. I couldn't take the sound anymore. I said, "Can you please stop printing whatever you're printing?" He said, "It helps me think." I walked over and pulled out the latest page. Blank again, just a faint shadow where words had been wiped away. I said, "You're wasting paper." He said, "No, I'm keeping proof." The word proof made my skin crawl. That night, I sat in bed scrolling through my feed. The video from dinner had over 1,000 views already. The comments were split, some cheering me on, others calling me cruel. My chest felt tight. I turned off the phone and stared at the ceiling until I heard the faint click of a door locking again. The next morning, Eli didn't speak during breakfast. He kissed Jude's forehead, grabbed his keys, and said he'd be late. I asked why. He said, "Downtown appointment." I asked, "Work or personal?" He said, "You'll find out." All day I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it was him. But it was just Mara, sending screenshots of more comments about the video. "You're trending in the office group," she wrote. "You look amazing, though." I typed back, "Thanks, but didn't hit send." That night I waited for him to come home. The house was too quiet, too clean. When I finally heard the car door close outside, I felt relief, until I saw what he was holding. A small stack of envelopes, all sealed, each with a neat label in his handwriting. Household, shared account, custody notes. I laughed because the word custody didn't make sense yet. I said, "You're really going all out with this accountant act." He said, "It's not an act." I asked what he was planning. He said, "Just documenting." "Documenting what?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time. The difference between who you say you are and what you do. That silence afterward was unbearable. When I went upstairs later, I noticed something odd. The guest bed was stripped, the drawers empty, the blanket folded neatly on top. The space looked too deliberate, like someone had finished packing. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. But I did check the calendar before bed. Another note had appeared in his small, careful handwriting. Downtown 9:25. The same phrase as before, written with precision. Eli's calmness had begun to feel like cruelty. Days passed where he spoke to me only through actions. Folded laundry, neatly labeled envelopes, the faint hum of the printer late at night. I told myself it was him being obsessive, but part of me knew something had shifted for good. That weekend, my parents invited us to dinner. They said Jude missed family time. I didn't want to go, but Eli said we should. His tone was polite but final. So I went. The restaurant was the same one where we'd celebrated our anniversary years ago. My mother had reserved the big round table near the window. Jude sat between us, humming quietly, sensing the tension. My father started with small talk, but my mother couldn't help herself. She asked why we hadn't been posting pictures together lately. I said we were focusing on privacy. Eli said, "That's one word for it." I tried to laugh it off. I told them work had been stressful, that Eli was just tired. He didn't correct me, just kept his hands folded neatly on the table. But I saw him watching me, not with anger, just that careful, clinical attention he'd had for weeks. Halfway through dinner, Mara texted me a video link. I shouldn't have checked it, but curiosity won. It was a clip from the company party, the lounge night with Tristan. Someone had captioned it, "Office chemistry goals." You could see Tristan's hand on my waist, my smile too wide, my eyes meeting the camera. The post already had hundreds of views. Eli saw the screen light up. He didn't say a word, just took a slow sip of water, as if confirming something. After dinner, outside in the parking lot, my mother pulled me aside. She said, "You should stop letting people film you like that. It never ends well." I said she was overreacting. She said, "So did I once." Eli opened the car door for me, polite to the end. The drive home was silent except for the turn signal clicking at every intersection. When we got home, he went straight upstairs. I stayed in the car for a while, scrolling through comments under that video. Half admiration, half disgust. Someone had tagged Eli's profile. When I went inside, the house smelled faintly of paper dust. His study door was half open. On the desk sat the same folder I'd seen before, now joined by two others labeled Utilities and Joint Account. I said from the doorway, "You're really archiving everything, aren't you?" He said, "You archive memories, I archive facts." I told him he was being ridiculous, that relationships aren't spreadsheets. He said, "They become one when words lose meaning." I snapped that he was turning our marriage into a courtroom. He said, "I'm just preparing for the hearing." That word hearing made my stomach twist. I told him to stop being cryptic. He said, "I already stopped talking. That was the last step." Then he turned off the lamp. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed again. Jude's cereal bowl was on the counter, half eaten, Eli's handwriting on a sticky note beside it, school drop-off handled. There was also a small reminder on the fridge calendar. Meeting, personal. Same handwriting, same steady lines. I went to work, pretending nothing was wrong, but people were whispering. Someone showed me a post. Tristan had reshared the party clip, adding, "She makes every room brighter." It was harmless, but the timing made it cruel. During lunch, HR called me in. They said someone had submitted an anonymous complaint about inappropriate workplace behavior. I froze. I asked if they thought it was Tristan's joke. They said it didn't matter who started it. Public perception was the issue. I tried to laugh it off, but the woman across the desk didn't smile. She said, "We need to protect the company image." When I got home that evening, Eli was in the kitchen making Jude's lunch for the next day. He looked tired but composed. I said, "You reported me, didn't you?" He said, "You reported yourself. You just did it in public." I told him that was cruel. He said, "No, it's consistent." Then he looked at me, really looked, and said, "You still think this is about me being jealous? It's not. It's about you needing an audience more than a partner." I said he was twisting everything. He said, "You twist it so you can stay the victim." That night I tried calling Mara, but she didn't pick up. I messaged Tristan, but his reply was short. HR told me to keep distance. Sorry. I sat in the dark living room, the hum of the fridge the only sound. Upstairs, I heard the faint scrape of a drawer closing. When I checked later, one of the folders was missing from his desk. The printer was unplugged, the laptop gone. The next morning, his side of the closet was half empty. His suits, shoes, and that grey coat he never wore anymore, gone. I tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. I told myself he was bluffing, trying to scare me. But by noon, I got a message from my mother. Eli came by, said he'll be staying with his brother for a bit. Everything okay? I didn't answer. That evening, Jude asked if Daddy was mad at me. I said no, he just needed space. He asked if space means leaving. I said, sometimes. He said, so it's my fault. I said, never. But I couldn't meet his eyes. Later that night, I went through Eli's desk drawers again. Empty, every folder, every USB stick, gone. Only a single blank sheet remained in the printer tray. I sat there for a long time, staring at it, before realizing he'd left one more note under the keyboard. Just 5 words, written neatly. "I'll handle this properly now." The night after I found his note, I couldn't stop hearing that one word. Properly. It kept looping in my head, colder, every time. He didn't write, "We'll fix this," or "We'll talk soon." He said, "I'll handle this properly." Like I was a task on a list, like I'd already been processed. He didn't come home that night or the next. I told Jude that Daddy was staying at Uncle Nathan's because of work. He nodded but didn't believe me. Kids always know when something's wrong. At work, the whispers got louder. Someone had leaked that HR meeting. My supervisor called me in, voice polite but distant. He said they were restructuring and that my role was being re-evaluated. I asked if this was about Tristan. He said it wasn't personal, but the timing said otherwise. That afternoon, Mara finally messaged me. "I think you should lay low for a bit," she wrote. "People are saying your husband's taking legal advice." My heart dropped. I typed, "That's ridiculous," but deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "He wouldn't. He's not that kind of person." Then I remembered the folders, the labels, the quiet precision. Maybe he was exactly that kind of person now. When I got home, the house felt too organized, too staged. Every trace of him was gone, except the framed photo from our wedding. It was face down on the sideboard. I called him that evening. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail that started angry and ended tearful. I said, "You can't just disappear and expect me to guess what you're doing." Then I said, "If you wanted space, fine, but don't threaten me with properly. That's cruel." He didn't call back. The next morning, a text arrived. "Please have Jude ready for 10:30. I'll pick him up." No greeting, no question, just logistics. When he came to the door, he didn't step inside. He just stood there, dressed neatly in a dark jacket, his car idling behind him. Jude ran out, hugged him, and asked if he was coming home soon. Eli said, "We'll see, buddy." Then he looked at me. "We'll talk after I drop him off." I said fine, pretending I wasn't shaking. When he came back an hour later, he stayed by the doorway, hands in his pockets. "We need to make this simple," he said. I laughed. "You mean properly?" He didn't rise to it. He just looked at me the way people look at something fragile but already cracked. You know, I've been patient, he said. I said, you've been cold, not patient. He nodded slightly. That's your version. I started crying then, angry at how calm he was. I told him he was destroying our family over rumors and videos, that everyone exaggerated. He said, you destroyed it the moment you made me a punchline. I said, you're twisting things again. He said, I'm straightening them. I asked what he wanted. He said, resolution. The way he said it made my knees weak. I asked if he'd spoken to a lawyer. He didn't answer. He just looked toward the kitchen, where the printer used to sit. You'll see soon enough, he said. I told him I didn't deserve this. He said quietly, maybe not this version, but some kind of consequence was always coming. When he left, the sound of the door closing felt final. The next few days blurred together. I barely ate, barely slept. Every sound outside made me think he was coming back, but he never did. Clara called me on Thursday. She said she'd seen him at a cafe downtown, meeting someone in a suit. I said, so what? Maybe he's talking to a financial advisor. She paused for a long moment, then said softly, Aralyn, he looked relieved. I wanted to hang up. Instead, I asked if she thought he'd really file something. She said, he's not loud like you. He finishes things quietly. That line made me sick. On Friday, Jude brought home a permission slip for a school trip. He asked if Daddy should sign it this time. I said, no, I'll handle it. He said, you always say that. That night, I couldn't stop pacing. Every corner of the house looked like proof of something. His empty chair, the unused mug, the faint square on the wall where his diploma had hung. At 10 p.m., I texted him again. Please just tell me what's happening. I'll fix it. I'll delete everything. We can start over. He replied 5 minutes later. It's not about deleting. It's about documenting. I threw the phone onto the couch and screamed into my hands. The next morning, he came by again to drop off Jude. He didn't come inside. He handed over the backpack, smiled at our son, then said, you'll get something soon. Don't ignore it. I asked, what kind of something? He said, something proper. I laughed bitterly. You think you're noble? You're breaking our home. He said, no, I'm protecting it from you. Then he turned and walked away. After he left, I tore through the drawers again, desperate for anything that could explain what he was planning. Nothing. Only that single blank page left in the printer tray. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the page. I kept thinking about all the times I'd said I wanted him to fight for me. Maybe this was him fighting, just not the way I expected. I poured wine and started rehearsing what I'd say if he ever gave me the chance. I'd tell him I was lonely, that I only wanted to feel wanted again, that he pushed me toward it with his silence. I'd tell him I didn't mean to humiliate him, but deep down, I knew those words wouldn't matter anymore. He'd already built his version of the truth, and this time, I couldn't talk my way out. When I looked at the clock, it was just past midnight. My phone buzzed once on the counter. A calendar notification I didn't remember setting flashed across the screen. Paper drop, 9:15.